Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 107 of Journey into Legends. Today I'll be reading the Star Wars Empire comics. Empire ran from 2002 to 2006 for a total of 40 issues. I haven't heard too much about this series, so I'm really excited to jump into it. If it's anything like the Republic comics, then it'll definitely be great. Anyways, without further ado, let's read and review. Alright, so I just finished the first arc of Empire, titled Betrayal, and honestly, I have mixed feelings. This one deals with an anti-Sith coup launched against Vader and Palpatine by some of the Grand Moffs. A pretty cool idea, and there were some things I thought were executed well. I thought the constant betrayals and double crossings kept the story pretty interesting. However, most everything else I found very underwhelming. The Moffs themselves were extremely uninteresting characters, the art wasn't the best and pales in comparison to the Republic comics, and I didn't really like Vader's story in this. He kept having random flashbacks to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and they never really culminated in anything meaningful, so it just felt like forced fanfiction to me. Secondly, there's this really weird moment where Vader is hunting a rogue Jedi, who turns out to actually be a wannabe Sith, who wants to train under Vader, and the execution of that moment was just really strange. Also, Boba Fett is there, just randomly, and adds absolutely nothing to the story. This was just a really weird story from beginning to end. Alright, this next arc follows Princess Leia on a mission first to Raltyr, then to Katata, in the weeks before the Battle of Yavin. This story is basically the first time Leia ever has to take arms against the Empire. Overall, this story was nothing too special, however there were a few aspects I really liked. Firstly, the events on Raltyr were apparently referenced in the original radio drama for Star Wars, which actually really improves my opinion of this arc. Secondly, I really enjoyed seeing more of the dynamic between Leia and Vader, as their scenes in this felt very in line with A New Hope. Taking a quick break from the Empire series, I next read a one-shot Valentine's Day comic called Breaking the Ice, which follows Han and Leia shortly before the events of Episode 5. We get to see some more arguing between the two, very reminiscent of their scenes in the film, but after they crash down on the surface of Hoth, they're forced to survive in the cold together, and it's actually a really sweet story. This story did a great job of highlighting the evolution of their relationship, from Leia thinking Han is nothing more than a selfish mercenary, to her slowly seeing the good in him. This story wasn't inherently interesting or memorable, but I personally found it very enjoyable. Sometimes I like a low-stakes, more personal story like this, and I think it's a good little companion piece to Episode 5. Next, we have issue 7, titled Sacrifice, which follows Boba Fett on a mission to the planet Solem, where he's been hired by the local Imperial governor to hunt down a local rebel leader named Yolan Bren. Overall, this was a pretty average issue. The writers of the old Boba Fett comics return here, as well as Cam Kennedy to do the art, so this was basically another Boba Fett standalone comic. Alright, next we have issues 8, 9, 12, and 15, a storyline called Darklighter, which for some reason was released sporadically, with 2 issues released initially, and then the others released later on. Anyways, we follow Biggs from his time on Tatooine, to his time with the Empire, all the way through to the events of A New Hope, where we see him defect from the Empire and join the rebellion. We see the deleted scenes from A New Hope translated into the comic as well. We also get to see the story from the Rogue One one-half one-shot retold, which was a cool bit of continuity. And of course, we reach the Battle of Yavin, where we see the death of Biggs in a new light. Overall, this was a great look into Biggs' life that made him a much more interesting character, and definitely made his death in the movie sadder. I also thought the art was really fantastic throughout. Next is issues 10 and 11, called The Short Happy Life of Roons Sewell, which tells the story of a rebel leader named Roons Sewell, a former actor who joined the rebellion and was a founding member of the Massassi group on Yavin. This story takes place at a ceremony honoring his life where Jan Dodonna gives a memoir telling the story of his life and how he recruited Jan into the rebellion. Overall, this was a fine little story, however, it was kind of pointless and boring. But it wasn't terrible, I just didn't get a ton of entertainment value from it. Our next issue is called What Sin? Loyalty, and it follows an Imperial commander named Akobi and a trooper loyal to him named TK-622. After 622 saves Akobi from multiple assassination attempts, Akobi then succumbs to a fatal attempt aboard the Death Star. As 622 investigates and tries to find the killer, rebels attack the battle station and the issue ends with the Death Star being destroyed, killing everyone on it including TK-622. Overall, this issue was fine, however, I really liked the ending with it tying into the Battle of Yavin. It's cool to know that while Luke is flying down that trench, there's disconnected little stories like this happening all over the Death Star. Next is issue 14, titled The Savage Heart. This one follows Vader immediately after the Battle of Yavin. With his ship damaged, he travels to the nearest Imperial outpost, which is on a backwater planet called Vol. There, Vader is attacked by the planet's local creatures. He kills the leader of the pack and takes his place. He then makes it to the outpost and uses their shuttle to return to Imperial space. There were a few cool moments in this one, mainly just seeing Vader in a fight scene. He also gets a glove ripped off, and seeing his exposed cybernetics was really cool. But other than those little things, this was such an underwhelming explanation of what happened to Vader right after A New Hope. I found that him becoming the new leader of the pack was a little cheesy and felt very random and out of character. Our next arc is issues 16 to 18, titled To the Last Man, and this story follows an Imperial lieutenant named Janek Sunbur during the Battle of Meridun. For about the first issue, I wasn't a huge fan of this storyline, mainly because I really didn't care for the characters, and I also couldn't really tell them apart. They were all just your average Imperial officers. I also think the art was pretty boring to look at. However, this story definitely won me over as it went on. Despite a lot of Sunbur's peers holding disdain for him, seeing the Aminans slaughter the Imperials and Sunbur being the one to step up and lead the charge against them was oddly inspiring. Especially the Imperials' final stand against the Amani, I found that a super inspiring and surprisingly pretty poignant moment. Anyways, this ended up being a pretty good little story with some good action, and the characters ended up being pretty interesting, specifically Sunbur and his general. Next we have issue 19, which is titled Target Vader. Basically, Vader is ambushed by a group of vengeful Falleens who seek to get revenge on Vader for the damage he did to their planet. And that's pretty much it. That Vader kills them, and that's it. It's always cool to see Vader kill some folks, but this was nothing too special. Our next arc is called A Little Piece of Home. In this one, Leia visits a moon in the Ryloth system where an old boyfriend of hers from Alderaan has an estate. She intends this moon to be the new rebel base after the fall of Yavin. Anyways, while there, her ex-boyfriend gets bitten by a snake and dies, and in anger, his brother tells Leia to leave and never come back. Overall, this was nothing too special. I guess it was cool to see Leia meet with other survivors of Alderaan, but other than that, nothing really happened in this arc. There wasn't any action or anything meaningful that happened. Next we have issue 22, titled Alone Together. In this one, Han, Chewie, Leia, and a rebel private named Dina Shan follow a distress signal to a mysterious planet. There, Han and Chewie find the ship transmitting the signal. Anyways, after finding the captain dead, they search the ship's logs and learn that the crew was killed by a dangerous creature. Then the creature attacks the ship, almost killing Han and Chewie before Leia and Dina come to help. Overall, this issue wasn't too great. I thought Dina wasn't an interesting enough character to follow. However, the other characters were portrayed pretty accurately, and I liked the art. Next, we have issue 23, titled The Bravery of Being Out of Range. The issue begins with Boshek from the Mos Eisley Cantina saving a girl named Rasha Bex from an extremist rebel group. After escaping, they hide out for a night before being found again. They once again try to escape and are saved from the rebels by the Empire, and it's revealed that Rasha was actually an Imperial captain. I didn't know what to expect from this issue, but I actually ended up really loving it. I didn't see the twist coming, and I thought the budding relationship between Rasha and Boshek was really interesting to follow. Our next arc is called Idiot's Array. During a supply run for the rebellion, Han is gambling and gets taken prisoner by an information broker named Jib Kopatha, a character who also appeared a few issues ago in Target Vader. Anyways, Han gets rescued by Chewie and an old smuggling friend of his named Sheel Odala. After he escapes, Vader arrives and kills Kopatha. This was a decent little arc. It's cool to see Han getting into smuggling shenanigans even after A New Hope, but it wasn't too special. The next arc is General Skywalker, and in this one, the rebels land on a seemingly uninhabited jungle planet where they're suddenly attacked by Imperials who followed them there. What makes this arc memorable is the inclusion of a clone named Abel, who's been stranded on the planet for over 20 years. It's really cool to see Luke team up with a clone trooper. It's a cool idea, it was executed fairly well, so overall I enjoyed this story. Next, we have issue 28, titled Wreckage. In this one, Boba Fett has to navigate the wreckage of an Imperial Star Destroyer to find a hologram recording for his client, an Imperial officer. The hologram recording ends up being a recording of the client's dead lover. When the client can't pay Boba's fee, Boba kills him. This was such a nothing issue, just super boring and meaningless. Also, a minor nitpick, for some reason the Imperial officer looked exactly like Grand Moff Tarkin, and it took me a while to realize that this was a different character. Our next arc is called In the Shadows of Their Fathers, which brings us back to the planet of Jabiim, where the consequences of the Battle of Jabiim are still being felt. It was extremely fascinating to see Luke uncover the mystery of his father's time on Jabiim during the Clone Wars, and how hated Anakin is by the natives of the planet. And it gets even more fascinating when Vader himself shows up. Reading this, just knowing that it's Anakin under there, makes the whole story more compelling. Anyways, I just loved revisiting Jabiim, I loved all the ties to the Republic comics, and I loved how Luke struggled with his father's legacy. Next, we have issue 31, titled The Price of Power. In this story, we visit the planet of Tis Sharl, where Darth Vader negotiates with the president of the Tis Sharl League about the price of blaster cartridges. However, Vader's purpose on the planet is a lot more sinister, as he plans to bait the president into dealing with the rebels. Vader's plan works, as he draws out a rebel representative who he kills. After President C.D. Ree realizes how vulnerable he is to the Empire's power, he resigns. Overall, this was a really lame issue. I don't know why they interrupted the Jabiim storyline for this crap. Next, we have issue 35, titled Model Officer. In this one, Vader is looking for rebel captives to interrogate for the location of the rebel fleet. However, all his rebels keep getting prematurely killed by the Star Destroyer's turbo lasers. It turns out that the gunner is a survivor of Alderaan, and is purposely killing the rebels to protect the location of the rebel fleet, while also trying to get his commanding officer killed by Vader. The issue ends with Vader revealing that the rebel base the gunner just destroyed was actually a colony of other Alderaan survivors, which is just brutal. This was surprisingly a fantastic issue. The rebels getting continuously killed off started off as a surprisingly hilarious running gag, and the twists were really effective. And now for our final arc of the series, we have The Wrong Side of the War. In this storyline, a group of disguised rebels infiltrate an Imperial base, including Luke, dressed as an officer, as well as some minor characters from past arcs, including Basso, a character from some of the early issues, Dina from that standalone Han and Chewie issue, and Abel, the clone trooper. We also have on the Imperial side, Janek Sunber from the Meriden arc. This arc is all about saving Joran's soul, a captured rebel who knows the rebel fleet's location, as well as saving some slaves. The big emotional crux of this arc comes from Luke and Sunber, who are revealed to be old friends from Tatooine. They reunite, and Luke tries recruiting Sunber to the rebellion, but fails as Sunber is too committed to the Imperial cause. I don't know if we'll ever see Sunber again, but I hope he stays committed to the Empire. I like that he's a good man, but unwilling to be turned away from the Empire. I don't think we need a redemption arc for him. Anyways, this arc was pretty entertaining, there was a lot going on, and I think it was handled pretty well. So overall, I wasn't the biggest fan of this series. Maybe I went in with too high of expectations, thinking this was going to be even close to as good as Republic. But overall, I just think the quality was all over the place. There were some arcs I kind of enjoyed, some I thought were boring or forgettable, some weren't great, but surprisingly there weren't any I found genuinely terrible, and there also weren't any I found amazing. The closest thing would probably be the Jabim arc. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for my next review, where we'll be continuing this story with the Rebellion comics. See ya.